Welcome to Free Media. I'm Amber Duke.
And I'm Robbie Suave. Well, the authorities continue to investigate the assassination of conservative media star Charlie Kirk, who was gunned down at Utah Valley University last week. The alleged shooter is 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. He's been in custody since last Friday.
Robinson is not cooperating with authorities, although interviews with his family and friends are helping to establish his guilt and a possible motive. Robinson allegedly expressed that Kirk harbored hateful views and is also believed to have been in a romantic relationship with his transgender roommate. Here was Utah Governor Spencer Cox on what we know so far.
There were reports yesterday that we can confirm that his roommate was indeed a boyfriend who is transitioning from male to female. That's information that the FBI had mentioned yesterday. We can confirm that as well, and that he is cooperating with authorities as well.
And Governor, you told the Wall Street Journal that Tyler Robinson was deeply indoctrinated with leftist ideology. Have investigators uncovered evidence to show that?
Well, so far that has come from his acquaintances and his family members. That's where that initial information has come from. Certainly there will be much more information that is released.
So much to discuss, obviously, relating to this topic. The major news event of the last week, a horrifying thing that happened to Charlie Kirk, someone you knew. I knew just a little bit, but obviously have followed and worked alongside in some respects by focusing on campus political movements and what he built over the years, which is incredible. And we've done a lot of writing on him at Reason. I'm sure you have as well at the Daily Caller, and people should definitely check those out if they haven't seen us kind of discussing his legacy. He's such a pivotal, important person, but we want to get into the reaction and everything going on this topic. But let's start with the suspect being apprehended, a kind of parsing of his potential motives that I would say I think it is always useful to be a little cautious as one goes through these things. Just because a figure is the victim is a political figure doesn't necessarily mean the shooter, the attacker, will have like a coherent set of political views. The would-be Trump assassin in Butler doesn't seem to have particularly coherent views. The Gabby Giffords would-be assassin from years ago didn't. That said, Charlie Kirk is a well-known conservative media figure, and so it would not be surprising, as it now seems to be the case, that it was motivated by perhaps his views on transgender issues, given that this person was alleged to be in a relationship with a transgender person, had said that Kirk was hateful and that sort of thing. So I think that picture is, again, we should move slowly, but is beginning to come into view.
Yeah, and I think some of the things that were etched on the bullet casings in regards to fascism, there's been a lot of people online, and in fact there was a YouGov poll this week suggesting a plurality of people believed that a Republican had committed the assassination attempt, or that it was some groyper or someone who believed that Charlie Kirk wasn't right-wing enough. This isn't a shock to any of our viewers, but typically people who are far right, I guess you could say, don't call other Republicans hateful or fascist.
Well, that was the idea that that he had been called hateful. Of course, that could have been not a direct quote. And the reason I thought, there wasn't very much good evidence put forward for the Groyper claim necessarily. Although I will say that some Groyper adjacent people are in fact alleging that he was killed for being too pro-Israel. Have you seen that?
Yeah, there's a whole Israel
Candace
conspiracy.
Owens is running wild with that one. So the idea that there was some kind of right involvement, I don't think that's panning out at all. And it's hilarious to watch the mainstream media figures who are saying, oh, but he comes from a Republican family, and oh, his family has a history with guns, as saying, well, that's some proof positive that he's a right-leaning person. But my larger point is, it is true though that the far left and the Groypers do overlap in their dislike of Israel, and so it wouldn't be that. I think that was totally implausible that he was in some weirdo connected to both communities.
Yeah, it's been bizarre. So getting into, I guess, what actually happened.
Yeah.
The thing that's scary to me is that there's not a clear way that you could stop something like this without a massive amount of police resources and advance work.
Oh, you mean in terms of the security and surveillance?
Yeah, exactly, because this person seemingly planned this attack, had been on campus hours before the shooting, and realistically had probably visited several times before that, had found this rooftop that perfectly overlooked where the tent was going to be, had smuggled a 30-06 rifle through his pants leg, and was able to drop down and sort of escape in the ensuing chaos. And what was really crazy about it was talking to law enforcement officials and security experts. He was kind of smart in that he did not eject the spent shell casing from his gun, and took the gun with him, which could provide forensic DNA and ballistic evidence. But the mistake was then leaving it in the woods, which he apparently had messaged the transgender roommate asking him to go pick up the rifle, but I guess police found it, or he was captured before the roommate was able to do that. So they were able to find a lot of DNA evidence over the towel and the firearm that directly connected him to the shooting.
Yeah, as much as people were kind of, even on the right, I think, were not totally thrilled with Kash Patel's performance and the FBI's performance, they did apprehend him in 2 days. Now, that's a different question about how to prevent this sort of thing, right? They caught him, good, and mostly they caught him because they put out a picture and the family identified him with how it actually happened. Right, because I don't want to live in a total sort of surveillance society or complete, police on every corner. I was talking to a security expert. I was on two-way, saying that more drone surveillance might be the middle ground. If you at an event where someone like a Charlie Kirk is going to speak, you have drones buzzing around and scanning the rooftops continuously, and maybe that I will still understand people being kind of uncomfortable with that, but that might be the kind of thing to do moving forward, because we certainly don't want this to become more common. It's not common. We've been arguing about how common political violence is. There's a lot of people really on all sides of the political spectrum, and mainstream people actually love this narrative. They don't love the idea. They love the narrative that political violence is getting so much worse and it's because of rhetoric. And I was like, is it getting all that much worse? I don't know. It's, people scream at lawmakers more often. Lawmakers get more death threats, but generally, people are not getting blown away left and right for political reasons. Now, we did just have the Minnesota state senators, and now we've had Charlie Kirk, a major national figure, actually killed.
And two attempts on Trump.
Which is
probably more analogous than the Minnesota case.
So if this is the beginning of some escalation, that's obviously very bad, and I hope that's not the case.
Yeah, I hope so too. And one of the things that you and I both wrote in our books about was the heckler's veto.
Yes.
The idea that if a vocal minority say that someone's views are not worth platforming or too hateful to be platformed at a university, or they engage in some threats of violence or massive protest, the university passes the buck of the payment, the cost of security, or the logistical requirements to host that event on the speaker, which effectively crowds out conservative speakers. So now we not only have a heckler's veto, but we have an assassin's veto.
Right. And from the university standpoint, that's not really their fault. I mean, if they say, we'd love to have you, Ben Shapiro, but we're a tiny little college. We can't, guarantee this form of safety. That ends up being a very bad thing for our discourse, indeed. Usually when people make threats of violence, they're not following through on it. Like this person, there's no evidence so far, maybe that'll change, that an actual threat was made. He planned to murder Charlie Kirk, not forewarn him or stop the event, actually kill him during the event, as far as we can tell, which is a different sort of thing. It's just, it's very, this is an event that I think will stick with us for a long time. Also, and we're going to talk about so many aspects of it, but the video footage, which is horrific, living online, being something probably millions of people saw, is gonna be a hard thing for a lot of people to get. It's just gonna stick with you in your brain. It stuck with me for the last week. Between that and Irina Zarutska, having to watch that horrific murder, just to be able to parse it and talk about it on the news, as is our job, is really brutal. And
yes, it's been very difficult, and I know the other difficult part of it for me has been seeing the reaction, which I think we're going to get into as well.
Yes, we're going to get into that. In fact, reactions to Kirk's death have been pouring in all over social media. Fans and friends of Kirk are obviously devastated by the news. Many liberals who didn't necessarily agree with Kirk are nevertheless horrified by his murder.
But of course, some on the left are either still attacking Kirk and including sharing false quotes that he allegedly said, or even outright celebrating his death. And their reactions drew swift condemnation from comedian Bill Maher. Good on him. Let's take a look.
I might drink a little more than usual today because, I mean, I don't know when this is airing, but this is a shit day because a guy who sat there, Charlie Kirk, got shot today. Yeah. And I can't stop thinking about it. And
neither can I.
And we shouldn't. And if you're on the other side of the political divide and you don't care because the wrong team guy got shot, fuck you. You're what's wrong with this country.
Interview there with Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins. He's actually one of my, I love the Smashing Pumpkins. Is one of the few entertainment people who I actually enjoy listening to what he has to say. He's an interesting guy. Neither here nor there. Yes, good on Bill Maher for that, because I certainly have seen plenty of not just criticism of Charlie Kirk, which everyone can engage in as much of that as they want, but actual happiness that he died. I haven't personally seen that from very many. That's not coming from Gavin Newsom or Kamala Harris or prominent Democrats, but it's there are people out there sharing all over social media that they're happy, and it's absolutely disgusting. And I would say that even if it wasn't Charlie, if it was anyone, I would say it, because death is awful. Murder is awful.
It
Who
does,
knew?
yeah.
That was a controversial statement.
It does hit home a little bit more, though, just going on Facebook and seeing people I went to high school with.
Yeah. Well, don't go on
sharing,
Facebook. That was your first mistake.
Forbid.
What are you doing?
But I mean, you see people you went to high school with or that you know personally sharing things that, even if they're not outright celebrations, are sort of like the he deserved it, or he brought this on himself by saying hateful things.
Blue sky liberals.
Yeah, and it's very disheartening, because I obviously shared a lot of Charlie's views, as did many people in the conservative movement. So we see this and we think, well, obviously we don't have as large of a platform as Charlie did. We don't have as many social media followers, and certainly didn't build anything like Turning Point USA. But we're people who talk about our ideas in public for a living. And to know so many average people would celebrate our death if that happened to us is really quite terrifying. And some of the polling that's been coming out suggests that this is, yes, a both sides issue, but I think predominantly a left issue. We saw a quarter of self-identified, very liberal people saying that the world is a better place now that Charlie Kirk is dead. A YouGov poll this week also found, as I mentioned earlier, that a plurality of people believe that a Republican did it. And there was also a poll that came out shortly before Charlie died indicating that liberal people are far more likely to say, by an order of 6-1, that political violence is justified, at least in some cases. So I know that there's a lot of both sides can do political violence, and of course that's true. There's crazy people of all political stripes, but I do think it is a bit of whataboutism to not identify that this seems to be a uniquely liberal problem.
Well, in terms of who actually commits political violence, I always say this question is almost beside the point, because there's so little political violence. It matters exactly how you count it. For instance, the Anti-Defamation League
their study's ridiculous.
They'll produce studies saying there's more right-wing violence, and I've looked at those more closely, and it's like, well, that's true, but that's counting as right-wing violence these kinds of white supremacist organizations that are A, like prison murders, or B,
gang killings, domestic violence.
Right, it's things that are not done because of the
ideology.
But people who are part of a white supremacist gang are violent people. It's not the kinds of political assassinations we're talking about. When we talk about that, it's not, and then it's not counting equivalent gang shootings as left-wing violence.
Right.
This is not a lot of violence of this kind anyway, so it doesn't really matter. In terms of who is more, I guess, willing to, and that matters, because it's not good if there's millions and millions of people saying I support I'm fine with political violence, but if no one actually goes out and does anything, not oh well, but thank God no one is actually, people just talk. Sometimes I think social media, I'm coming around to this idea increasingly, is just like people's worst thoughts, your intrusive thoughts, who hasn't in a moment of, really embarrassing anger or fury or whatever, say, oh, I wish someone would just die, but you don't actually mean it. You're thinking that yourself, but because we have social media, people actually put that sentiment, which they don't really believe, and they would never follow through onto social media. So I guess that would be my attempt to, white pill this idea that everyone actually believes in violence.
I think my concern about the increase in that type of thinking on the left is that one of the other things that you and I have talked about in terms of where campuses have moved over the past decade or so is that they have a specific ideology that believes words are in fact violence. So if you say something that can be perceived as offensive, then someone needs a safe space or a trigger warning because you can actually cause them psychological or physical harm by saying things that they don't like. And my fear is that when you equate words to violence, then if you respond with actual physical violence, then it could be characterized as self-defense.
Yeah, that is a big problem. That's something you and I have both written about and spoken about, that increasing trend in lefty thought. It's more like left culture even, because there is this idea on the right that has come through in these last couple of days that I'm critical of, that it's, we're going to use this as some pretense to defund or go after or pursue government retribution against lefty NGOs or organizations or political fundraising, or like I saw someone said, oh, this is what a university education does to him. He spent like a semester at university. Again, we don't know the full picture, but it looks far more like this.
Online radicalism.
It was online radicalism, not brainwashed by a professor or brainwashed by George Soros. And there's a kind of maybe conspiratorial thinking is too unfair, but that it's they're out to get you. They being these, Cernovich keeps saying the billionaires are out to get you. That sounds itself like leftist thinking. I'm like, this person was radicalized by his peer group online, probably.
We should probably move into how the right is responding. And
Vice President J.D. Vance was one of those people hosting the Charlie Kirk show yesterday and rejecting calls for unity. He instead encouraged fans of Kirk to report anyone who makes excuses for the violence against Charlie Kirk to their employers, which some would describe as an embrace of cancel culture. I think we're going to debate that. Let's watch this.
There is no unity with people who scream at children over their parents' politics. There is no unity with someone who lies about what Charlie Kirk said in order to excuse his murder. There is no unity with someone who harasses an innocent family the day after the father of that family lost a dear friend. There is no unity with the people who celebrate Charlie Kirk's assassination. And there is no unity with the people who fund these articles, who pay the salaries of these terrorist sympathizers, who argue that Charlie Kirk, a loving husband and father, deserved a shot to the neck because he spoke words with which they disagree.
Fiery reaction from our vice president. I understand his anger. Charlie Kirk was a close friend of his, and I'm certainly angry too that this happened, and absolutely willing to condemn anyone who makes excuses for it. I think that's vile. But the explicit rejection of calls for unity is not exactly what I wanted to hear, even if it's perfectly fair to call out people for making excuses for this. I think it might have just been a better thing to hear him say something like, I know the overwhelming majority of people, even if you don't like Charlie Kirk, think this is bad, and it is bad, and we're happy to hear that. Something a little more unifying, but I know people are very angry, and it's an emotional moment, and that's what came through.
It just feels very convenient for people on the left in particular, as so many of their political acolytes are celebrating or justifying, for them to throw up their hands and say, hey guys, we need unity now. Like, you just killed one of us, and you have millions of people on your side who are happy about it. Like, I think J.D. Vance is right. You can't have unity with people who think that political assassinations are a good thing, that the country is better off that Charlie Kirk is dead, that they're happy that Charlie Kirk is dead. And just to get a little bit into Charlie's legacy and kind of what he believed. Obviously, he was a huge free speech advocate.
Yes.
He also...
One of the things I admire about him.
Absolutely. He was...
Not just a free speech advocate, a free speech practitioner.
He was.
He would go onto campuses and argue with anyone, and he enjoyed doing it. Like, he had a smile on his face while he did it. He practiced free speech.
He also was an advocate for truth and for moral clarity. He was a man of faith. He was a very devout Christian. And I read an important sort of distinction from a pastor recently who talked about how we are called as Christians to love our enemies and pray for our enemies, but we're not called to treat our enemies as friends. We should treat our enemies like enemies, and that's how I feel in the aftermath of the shooting and the reaction.
Some distinctions that not everyone is drawing, though. J.D. Vance, I suppose, drew it and said that, I don't like the... I'm sorry, I don't like the call your employers thing. It's very Karening to me regardless, but at least he was saying do it if they're actually advocating for violence. I've certainly seen examples of libs of TikTok and other people pointing out not just people who said violence against Charlie Kirk was okay, but who criticized him in some way that seems to me repeating all the exact faux pas of the lefty wokeness cancel culture. I know no one gets points for any kind of ideological consistency anymore. No one cares. The right is saying, well, they did it, so we're going to do it. And that's where we're at. And it's, it's me and Thomas Chatterton Williams and a few other intellectual dark web rejects who still care about this. But I am a little stunned at how sweeping this cancel culture campaign, and again, in some cases, might be perfectly fine. We're going to get into a case in a minute where I think a firing was absolutely justified. But it's clear, like Shane Gillis, did you see the Shane Gillis thing? Like,
yeah, that was stupid.
That guy's problem was so fucking stupid.
Like, oh, you're audio guy. So
he doesn't get to pick his audio guy.
I will say, so I do think that going after anyone who just criticized Charlie or said they disagree with his views is not justifiable, but I think there is a massive difference between cancel culture and what is happening now. Because for me, the distinguishing factor about cancel culture was not just people getting fired, but it was people facing punishment that didn't fit the crime that they had done. So, for example, like digging up old tweets, a rodeo clown who has like no political power dressing up as Obama. You had a guy who made like the
happened to a rodeo clown?
Yes,
I don't remember that one.
Yeah, it was during Obama's presidency. There was a guy who was driving past a BLM protest and was like cracking his knuckles outside of his truck, and someone took a picture of it, and his hand was like this, so it looked like he was doing okay, which they said was a white power symbol.
Yes,
and he was fired from his job. There was the Covington Catholic case. Like, to me, it was all about elevating fake outrage in order to impose consequences on people who had done things that were totally within the Overton window of acceptable political debate.
Or had been done years ago, or were not even political,
or out of context.
Kids,
and so I think there's a massive difference between that and saying, like, yeah, a nurse who works in an emergency room who celebrates death should probably not be employed there. Like, to me, this is a question of basic humanity. It's not a political opinion to say that violence is good. Like, that's a humanity question. That's a morality question. And so to me, that is, losing your job for that is perfectly acceptable punishment.
I hear you, and I'm not saying you're necessarily, okay, 'cause nobody's entitled to a job. Your employer can take action against you. For cancel culture, for me, it's like a series of criteria, or it's like almost like you're diagnosing a disease. Like, if you meet 6 of the 9 characteristics of it, it's cancel culture. If you don't, it's not. And so it matters how prominent is the person. Now, and some of what's happening now is to people who are not prominent at all. They're employed as teachers, nurses, whatever. How bad was the thing you said? Are you in a public-facing role? Are you in if you're a communications professional or a columnist or a political figure who has a high degree of expectation that your words will be carefully parsed, and that's what your job is to do, then it's not really, I would not say I'm canceled if Reason Magazine or The Hill fires me because they don't like my opinions. I'll be sad. I'll be like, censorship, how dare they? But to some extent, that's what they hire me to do. Where if it's an obscure person, was this thing said in public or in private? Was it said, for instance, the teacher or the nurse, did they say it in their classroom or on the job, or did they say it in a private context? And then the other thing was, because I know the left has deployed this argument too against, for instance, professors who they said, said something indicating a kind of racial bias. Well, then they'll say, well, this proves that the person would treat a black student differently than the white student. So they shouldn't be employed because they're entitled to their opinion, but it demonstrates some kind of not fitness for the job.
Yeah, but again, it's like, well, they would say that about someone who criticizes affirmative action. We're saying that if you celebrate the murder of a conservative, then you're probably not going to treat your conservative students well, which I actually think is a perfectly sound, logical argument. But we do agree on one of the firings, which is important, which is...
oh yeah, we're going to get to this one.
Yes, Karen Attiah, who is a columnist, or was a columnist for the Washington Post, didn't just criticize Kirk. She quoted him as making an unkind observation about black women as a group, but the quote that she used was completely made up.
Yeah.
And she also shared a letter from the Washington Post indicating why she was fired. And some of the other things that they flagged as important were her saying essentially that white people are responsible for violence and they don't care if violence happens to anyone but a white, but she just racialized the entire thing. It was very
white people, am I right?
Yeah, exactly. It was, what did the college activists used to put, like the letter Y, PP to represent white people, so that if you searched white people, it wouldn't come up. So it was like a way for them to be racist without anyone knowing.
The Washington Post also could have just said, I think their explanation for why they fired her was more, has opened themselves up to criticism. They literally could have just said, she contributed to incorrect knowledge about Charlie Kirk by sharing a quote that is not.
Yes.
And it is not, as some people said, like just one word was omitted from the quote. The way that she changed it to say black women fundamentally alters the meaning of the quote, because if you watch the entire interview, what he is saying is that for specific black women, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Representative Sheila Lee,
Kamala Harris and Michelle Obama.
No, it wasn't actually Kamala Harris. It was Michelle Obama and someone else.
I thought it was Kamala.
I don't recall. Anyway, it was saying that because their support from affirmative action, the existence of racial preferencing.
And their own admission that they had been hired because of their race.
They got special considerations because of their race will lend credence to the argument that they are undeserving for those positions.
Right. And their own actions show that they're undeserving for those positions.
Right, and you can disagree with that point. You can say that he didn't, make it in the most rhetorically perfect way, but that it was not him saying that everyone in this category does not deserve their achievements. It is an argument that I agree with, that we should not give racial preferences because just the most qualified people should get the jobs or be admitted, and if everyone succeeds on their own merit, it is much more easy to dismiss racism and no, you deserve the position. It invites unfair and cruel ways of demeaning people or looking kind of suspiciously at people if we use those kinds of systems.
Which was his point, by the way, which he made the same point about black pilots, which is one of the other things that they've been using to criticize him as a racist. And his whole point is no, actually, if you hire pilots because they're black, then people who board a plane and see a black pilot are going to wonder if that person got the job because they're black and not because they were held to the same standards.
I remember having these arguments that say, what, you wouldn't get on a plane if there was a black pilot? No, of course I would get on a plane with a black pilot, but I don't want a system where where the pilot was picked for some reason other than that they're the best person to fly the plane.
Isn't that common sense, by the way?
Well, not only is it common sense, it's something like 70% of people agree with, even in liberal California.
Yeah, again, this is not like a radical position, but
no, this is this issue is decided.
The other great thing about Karen's letter she shared from the Washington Post is they also said in it, we actually maybe could have overlooked your racism and explicit mischaracterization of Charlie Kirk if you were good at your job, but there were also performance issues. So it's not only were you completely disgusting in the aftermath of a political assassination, but you weren't good enough at your job to justify it.
Right, and the Washington Post obviously is in the midst of realigning the ideological opinions of the opinion page to be more similar to the ones that I hold. So I'm all for it, and I wish Jeff Bezos the best of luck. So this is an example of something where I wouldn't call it cancel culture. I would say, being fired for your job. Her job is as a journalist, you have to get quotes correctly. You can't defame people. Now, you can't actually defame someone who's deceased, but you still should be accurate about the things they've said, and so that, I would say, is fine.
Yes, and another area of agreement we're going to get to where I think we go from beyond consequence culture to cancel culture is what Attorney General Pam Bondi has said recently. She's annoyed quite a few people in her own political party after she vowed to specifically go after people for engaging in quote-unquote hate speech relating to Charlie Kirk. Let's watch.
There's free speech and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything. And that's across the aisle.
The free speech is different than hate speech thing is just kills me every time I see someone on either side fall for it. I saw Tim Walz do this during the campaign. I've seen so many people do it. Really hope she would have known better. How many times do we have to say it? There's no separate category that's hate speech. The Supreme Court has never said this is hate speech and that's permissible. On the contrary, they've said what you would define as hate speech is perfectly protected by the First Amendment because what is hateful is we would obviously disagree about that, so it's protected. You know, she later then tried to cover herself and say, well, hate speech that is going, is encouraging violence. Well, that's just incitement, and that is not protected, but we call that incitement.
Yeah, she just used the left's favorite turn of phrase to criminalize free speech, and apparently didn't even realize that she was doing it. It's just unbelievably stupid, and it really does undermine, I think, the just cause of, again, holding people accountable for who are celebrating a political assassination. It goes, and I think we don't need the DOJ to arrest people for celebrating Charlie Kirk. The free market is handling it just fine, right? Employers are making the decision to cut ties with people who they find have moral values that don't align with their own.
Right.
Which, and by the way, moral values in the sense of actual morality and not political opinions. Moving to throw people in handcuffs for doing that, it really undermines, I think, the just cause that conservatives are carrying out right now.
Why don't you guys concentrate on apprehending and preventing actual violent crimes and not policing obviously protected speech?
Yes.
And then she also said that there was somebody at Home Depot, an employee who wouldn't print
it was Office Depot, yes.
Or whatever it is.
They wouldn't print a sign for a vigil.
Right, and that person got fired.
And they got fired because people were like, hey, Office Depot, you suck.
Fine.
We don't need to sue Office Depot.
No, she was going to do the cake baking thing. She was going to be, and Matt Walsh, I agree with him on that. He was like, we've been fighting for the right for years for a business to not have the obligation to complete.
And we won. And now you want to reopen the can of worms for the left to again go after
that shows a lack of
owners.
Having thought through your own philosophical principles at all. That is very worrying.
How many strikes does she get? 10?
Yeah,
not 3 apparently.
The Epstein stuff. Yeah, her and Kash Patel. I don't know, and I'm not the only one. I see a lot of people on the right actually who are not thrilled with how this is going between the Epstein stuff. Between this matter, I don't know. People are not happy.
No,
but Trump loves them. Trump loves Pam Bondi, as far as I know. You're not happy. Yeah, she should watch it. And Ted Cruz and Matt Walsh and everybody when it was
of course, as they should have.
It's free speech.
One person I have been enjoying commentary and public statements from is the Utah governor. I think he's actually been pretty pitch perfect.
Yes, I totally agree. It behooves one to be calm, collected, just report the facts, especially when you're the governor at you're kind of the point person for just informing everyone about what's going on. I think it's helpful to not get too wildly over your skis. We're actually going to play another segment from him. The governor did, however, call out social media as, in his view, a big motivating force behind the psychological harms to society that we're seeing. Let's take a look at this clip and discuss.
And I can't emphasize enough the damage that social media and the internet is doing to all of us. Those dopamine hits, these companies, $1 trillion market caps, the most powerful companies in the history of the world, have figured out how to hack our brains, get us addicted to outrage, which is the same type of dopamine, the same chemical that you get from taking fentanyl, get us addicted to outrage and get us to hate each other. I'm seeing it in real time since the tragic death of Charlie Kirk. I'm seeing it in every corner of our society.
Yeah, I appreciate his comments, even though I think it's complicated whether I agree with him ultimately or not. I mean, I certainly think social media and being too online can be very bad for you and is very bad for a lot of people and is obviously changing our society in profound ways. I think, like anything done in excess is harmful. Some people are way too addicted to, we see people in our own lives who are way too addicted to their smartphones or whatever it is. At the same time, I feel like a hypocrite totally disdaining social media. I use social media to share my views, to give information to people. The kind of careers you and I have are made possible by the alternate media platforms that social media has helped create. I think the existence of YouTube and X and even Facebook at one point, not so much today, has been, again, good for getting alternate ideas out there. So I certainly can't disdain the entire project and say that it's like the end of some extinction event that we're talking to each other in this way. That said, like I said earlier, I think social media is maybe giving us a wrongful impression of how inclined toward violence people might be, and allows people to live out some worst fantasies that are not good. It's a complicated subject for me.
It is. I mean, on one hand, I think the ability of people to share views anonymously was hugely beneficial to the right at a time when there were really significant cancel culture efforts.
You can tell it's hugely beneficial to the right because liberal authorities in the European Union and the UK are trying to take away that, right?
But then I go on Reddit and I go to a pop culture subreddit and see literally every comment talking about Charlie deserving it or celebrating the death, and I went, oh no, this was a mistake. So yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I think I'm very much an advocate of, like, if you're a parent, you need to be really judicious about at what age you give your child a phone and access to social media, and need to be really careful about what they're engaging with, because young people's brains are very easily manipulated and can become more addicted to these types of platforms than individuals whose brains are more developed.
I don't have any problem with that at all. I encourage that as well. I think being wary of the technology, or being, talking to, empowering families to not do it. If the school wants to not have phones, especially if it's just them deciding it rather than the government, I'm absolutely fine with that. I no problem with any of that. But sometimes, broader or even legal or explicit mandates get introduced by government that I worry will.
Well, like the Online Safety Act in the UK is disturbing. But yeah, I look at the picture that the alleged shooter's family shared of him getting his own computer at age 10. And the mom made a sort of joking comment about, well, he doesn't have to talk to us anymore because now he has his computer. And I just think, oh my gosh, like, that's where it started. I know, and that must be so heartbreaking for them. And it might very well prove to be the case that with this specific individual, it was a case of online radicalizing or going down some kind of wormhole. How common is that? We see a lot of people. This was true with, like, some of the kind of alt-right Groyper stuff, that it was like it was largely an online thing that most people grow out of, and most people who participate in weird, unhealthy internet subcultures do grow out of it or have some kind of phase related to it. And a lot of people use social media, I think, to have healthy social engagements, maybe in cases where they wouldn't find those in real life even. So I'm so unwilling to make sweeping judgments about how on net good or bad it was. But I certainly your heart breaks for a family. From their pictures, they look like a happy family. They look like a normal family, and that's really disturbing and really
makes us all go, you can't help, it's human to go, how could this have been prevented?
Right.
What should be done differently? And sometimes there are no satisfying answers to that.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we'll definitely still be talking about this in the days and weeks to come. Thanks so much for watching this extended episode of Free Media. We'll be back tomorrow with more. See you then.